Welcome back, guys. Today, and I'm hoping I can record this here, we're going to go over using the Windows Rescue CD to restore an image on a hard drive or to back up your computer. Now, I already did a video previously, and I'll put a link below on how to make an image to use with this. I have to use the camera today instead of screen capture because I'm going to be recording a part of the video on the screen that happens outside of the Windows operating system, and my screen grabber just doesn't work that way. I don't have one of those inline cable types. So for those of you that didn't catch the previous video, inside Windows 7 and Windows 10, I'm just going to do this really quick here, you can go to Windows settings. You want to go down to update, backup, and recovery area, and over here there's this funny little thing for backup, and you want to go to backup and restore Windows 7 version. This was back then. Apparently they took this away in Windows 8 and people got upset, and I could see why. Now, to make a system image, it's just as simple as clicking on this top there. Let me get rid of the back of the window there, and it's going to look for a drive. Now, I have 120 gig, actually it might be 160 drive. This is my secondary drive. You really want to go from one hard disk to another. So anyhow, it found that, and that's currently plugged in on drive F. And we looked at this in the other video. In my drive F, I have an image. Now, normally this would just say Windows Image Backup, but I changed the wording on the folder, so if I was to create a new one, it won't accidentally overwrite that. Because if you leave it with the folder name, it creates by default. Anytime you do a new image, it overwrites the previous. Now, there isn't enough room left on this drive to do a functioning image. And I'll show you that, because right now if I say, okay, it's free, all you'd have to do is click next. This is how easy it is. You make sure you tell it which ones to go. Now, in this case, for Windows 10, you're going to have one that's your system reserve. That's your system disk. And then you're going to have your C disk, which is the one that you normally put your programs and stuff on that you would use. You can't see system disk when you're running because it doesn't have a drive letter. But here you have your C system, so you want to make sure at least those two are checked. If you had any other partitions on that disk you want to back up, you can add them there. But remember, your total size is, you got to have room on your target drive. And the nice thing about this backup is it only grabs the data that's there. It doesn't do a full byte for byte image. It just grabs the used data and then remembers how much space there was at the end of the drive. So that's actually really handy too. So anyhow, we have the system, and I'm just going to click next because it is going to fail on that drive because it is already out of space. And I'm doing this on purpose because you're going to see here, you would normally get this window, but here it's failing because, as it says, I have no more space left. If I really wanted to take that image, excuse me, I have a bit of a cold. If I really wanted to take that image, I'd have to delete that folder that's on my my second drive and then let it take a new one, or just rename it and let it overwrite. Anyhow, what we're making is the repair disk. That's what this is about. So I already burnt this DVD. You are into this far of your computer. Hopefully you already know how to make a DVD, so I'm not going into that. Basically, this will burn the DVD for you, and it's bootable. Okay, so let's assume you have a disk that's not working. There are some tools in your computer, and if you go down to your computer here, bear with me, I have to grab my keyboard. You might want to look for this command here, and literally just go to search, or just start in Windows 10, just start typing CMD, and you'll see it come up. And you want to run that, right click it and run it as administrator, and then you will see this. It's one of those scary black terminals. Now, there are lots of internet and other YouTubes that show you how to use this, but we are just looking at one particular command, which I hope I typed correctly. It's a little hard for me to see at this distance, but disk part. And yes, I did. So then we want to list the disks. Now, this is going to be a messy list for me because I've got some external ones. Oh, well, that's good. I guess the flash ones didn't count. Good. Okay, so I have a Interesting. Okay, so I have that approximately a 1.5 gig drive. That is my new C drive. The one at the bottom that you see is 931 was a disk that actually started to die, and I had to move Windows from that disk. So in my use case just recently, the disk that's number 2 on that screen, this one here, got moved from there. I moved the Windows operating system from this disk to that disk. But for now, I forgot that it was still plugged in. So anyhow, in the middle, this is the drive that we were using to store the image on. But in here, you can list your disks, see what disks the operating system, and there's a few other tools. And I'm going to go into that in just a moment. Okay, hopefully this thing isn't going to wiggle the whole time, because you're just on a simple tripod stick here. But when you have disk part open, as you can see, we type list disk. Now you can pick a disk that you want to check, because sometimes your disk might not be formatted correctly, but there's a bunch of commands that you can use, and I'm just going to pick one here. So select disk, and I want to pick 2. Now everything you do is targeted at that disk. Now there are a few commands that will go system wide, but I'm not going to get into them. We just want to see this right now. So I'm going to list that'll let you see the partitions on that disk. So I split it in half. I suspect the bad clusters that caused my problem earlier is actually in the second partition. And I did an actual real long low-level format that took about 16 hours total. And yeah, that is not showing up in this video. Anyhow, Heather helped me with that because she babysat the partitioning when I was at work, because that's how long they take. Anyhow, you would see these are your partitions, and you can see for disks, you can see the partition type, and if it says GPT, if your motherboard does not have the opposite of the old BIOS, I can't remember, EFI, if you don't have EFI based BIOS, if you are a GPT type partition, Windows will not boot from it. You can have that type of partition as a secondary disk, you just can't have it as your OS. So a disk as big as this, that's technically, where is it? Oh, actually, sorry, it's not plugged in. I have a big disk that's 3 terabytes. It's actually too big to be an MBR style partition. It has to be GPT partition. Windows 10 will not see that to boot from it, not as its whole size. It'll see the disk, you just can't see its whole 3 gigs. The maximum Windows 10 will see under a normal old MBR style partition system is 2.2 gigs. So anyhow, we know we're in the right size because we have a disk. We'll say that this was the disk we were going to target. We have a disk here that's within the 2 gigs total, and for this point it looks kind of healthy, but we're not going to worry about that. We're just going to say, okay, we can see there's partitions here. Now I could clear those partitions just by typing clean, and if you typed clean and hit enter right now, the partitions on disk 2 would be gone, and as long as it was an MBR style disk, you could actually put Windows on this. You could go right to it. Windows will reformat and partition anything that it needs to make it look like your old disk. And we're going to look at that in a minute. But anyhow, we've just had a quick look in here. There's some in-depth stuff I might go to later with this if there's interest, about how to recover some small accidents you might have done with your data. And don't just assume you've killed your Windows system, because there are some other tools that allow you to go in and fix this. There's some Windows-based stuff, but I'm only showing this because this very program is actually on the repair tool. So I'm going to go do the repair tool now and put that disk in, and we're going to do a reboot, and then I'm going to come back. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to record. Sorry, I'm just going to reboot here in a second. That was the actual repair disk opening up. So I'm going to reboot, and we'll come back. Now let's see, it should detect that disk in a drive. Sometimes you're booting from this disk because your main operating system has given up the ghost. But sometimes not. Now we need to see if it's going to detect my CD. Yeah, we want to boot from the DVD. You might have to go into your BIOS and select that as a target for booting. And it takes a minute here, so I'm just going to do this in real time. Let's see if this boots here. And I'll pause this and I'll come back once we get a little bit further, but it takes a little while to load this disk into RAM. Okay, that was a much longer boot time than I remembered, so it's a good thing I didn't grab it all live. Now, at times you might hear our little doggy in the background, but that's fine. She just gets excited and she wants to play along too. Anyhow, pick your language, however you're doing. This is what you're going to see when the disk finally does boot, because I forgot how long a DVD takes to boot. Anyhow, so we're going to go into US because it works fine for me. Now, Windows is working on this disk. There has been an installation of Windows on the C disk, and it detects that, so you'll see the continue to Windows. If the drives in your computer, if none of your disks have a functioning Windows system, or what looks like a functioning Windows system to this tool, this top option will not be there. You'll only see turn off your computer and troubleshoot. For our uses, we're going straight into troubleshoot. Now, that terminal that we saw inside Windows that I launched, the command terminal that you have to run as administrator, you can open it here and it automatically knows that you're the administrator if you're here like this, and you can do the very same thing. So I'm just quickly going to type again the same things. And it'll load. Now it'll take a second just to quickly check all the disks. And then you want to get a listing to make sure the drive that you plan on working at least shows up here. It may not have a drive letter associated with it or any of that stuff, but at least it shows up. So just for fun, I'm going to select disk 0 because you can. And then list partition. And that'll tell you the partitions you've made on it. Now you want to see, for general use, you just want them listed as primary. But I've got 3 partitions on the drive. The first one is usually going to be small. In my case, it's 500 megs. That's where your actual boot system lives. And then usually your second partition is where your C drive or your real operating system is sitting there, assuming you only have one operating system. Now, there's a funny thing, and I'm going to get into it in a different video, and sometimes people do this by accident. They'll be in a formatting tool or whatever, and they'll see that their C drive is not active. There's actually a word called active. And they'll click it on, and then they'll leave that program, and then the next time they reboot Windows, it won't boot. The only partition that can be active, as far as I know, on a Windows system, Windows 10, is that small system one, in this case, partition 1. Anyhow, so this is a tool that you could use. You can do just about anything you need to do to your disks in here. You can see what's plugged in your system. You can make sure that you've got, for example, one particular disk that has the image that you want to apply another. So in this case, we have disk 1 has an image that you want to put on another disk. Now I have to be careful because if I was to start that now, it really would put an image back, but we're going to look at that. Okay, so it goes back to this menu, go back into troubleshoot. Now, startup repair. This is awesome. Sometimes you apply your recovery image and your boot is buggered up. There's no better way to put it. It's just messed up. There's no reason why it shouldn't. I've done it by hand. I've gone through and made sure all the settings are the way that it kind of should be, but something in Windows is stopping it from booting. You'd be surprised, this little tool right here usually finds it and fixes it, and does a pretty good job. It's pretty much needed after I had to use what was a damaged image to actually make this drive work, but that's a whole other thing. But you would go into image recovery here and choose a target item. Well, we want Windows 10. Now it can't find a system image. Now that's a little bit of BS because there is a system image. I've got too many drives plugged in. Alright, well, in a way that's kind of protected me. But what will happen is I rename. Oh, that's correct. If those of you remember the other video, I renamed the folder. I put a little tag on the end of it to make sure that it wasn't touched. But if you had that folder named properly, whatever one was named, it would find it, and then you could apply it to your C drive here. And that's pretty much as easy as it gets. You would just hit next. It's really good idea to only have the two disks connected, the one that has your image and the one you want to put it on, because Windows might get confused and wipe all your disks except for the image source. So if you have a data disk connected like I do right now, it might try and do that. But realistically, if I had that stupid folder named correctly, which I can't do right now, maybe I can. Let's have a little thing here. Just out of fun. Nuts. I forgot, oh yeah. I forgot how to use DOS. Okay. So that's it. Now you see I have it named funny. See this recent September blah 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 on the end? If I had it just this first part, this program would work fine. But by putting this end on the end, I've stopped it from being overwritten or deleted or used. So again, this part here would just need to be removed. I'm not going to do that right now because that is my real image. But in this program, this is all you'd really need, and you could put that image recovery on top of a blank new drive. So as long as the image was small enough, if the original image was small enough to fit the new drive, you can literally move your operating system from one disk to the other. If the new disk is bigger, it'll do that just as well. But there's another thing we need to do for that, and I'm actually going to eject this disk, and we're going to go back into Windows, and I'm going to show you something. It's probably going to have a hissy fit. So we're going to power the PC down and take the disk out of the drive. So I want to go back into Windows here. And I'm going to pause you, and we'll come back when I'm in Windows. Okay, we booted back into Windows, and I'm just going to open up this thing here, Min Tool Partition Wizard. You can download it. I'm just going to use it because it makes what we're about to do a little simple to show you. Get rid of that. Okay. Now, we were looking at part disk. I'm just going to stretch that a little bit here. And you can see there's that 500 megabyte system. It doesn't have a drive letter, and that's actually what your computer uses to boot. This is your C drive, whatever you want to call it. That's where your Windows really lives. And I've got a little bit of backup space because this drive was much bigger than the original. The original that had the problem and failed is this one down here, disk 3. If you notice, I have these all set to MBR, which means they have the maximum size. The maximum size of the disk that can be seen by your computer is 2 terabytes. But they're all under that anyways. But if that said GPT, this disk could be above 2.2 terabytes, and you could still make it a single partition. Or you could have a ton of partitions, either way. But right now, I just have it that for simplicity. The drive that we had the image stored on was this one, and you can see it's mostly full. But you see this disk up here it's 1 terabyte roughly, that partition. And if you're going to back that up using the image, and then have an image you want to apply to another disk, just about every time Windows wants the target to be the same size or better. Now if that's too big, and you know you're going to a smaller disk, if you see I've only used 7% of it, you can, where is it here? Do we have it here? No. Move, resize. So you can go in here, you can resize it. That might not be the best way. There's actually a command which should be shrink. Where is it here? I think it really is just resize in this. I wanted to see it visually, but in Windows, I'm just going to reduce this for the moment. In Windows, you right-click down here for Windows 10, and you go into Disk Management. Everybody has this. This is built into Windows. And there's the C partition, you can see that. You right click on this and you can shrink volume. It's going to have a quick check of your disk. Every time you run shrink volume, I've noticed that it seems to only let you go half. For example, you can reduce the size of that partition by half. And that's per boot, so you could reduce it by half. Size of available shrink space. So that shows you how much you could shrink. So if you see approximately, it's letting me shrink it by half. Now, as you can see, I was only using 7%. So I shrink it by half. Restart Windows once the shrink is done. Do this again, and you should be able to do it down in steps of about a half until you find, as long as you've not gone, as it says, you can't shrink beyond a point that there's an unmovable file. Once you've done this enough times that your C drive is small enough to fit your system, plus this is small enough to fit on your new target, say you just bought a solid state drive, you can use that method to go through a few iterations to shrink it down to then make an image that will fit on your new SSD. Now, when you go to make your image, of course, you want to make sure you're only selecting the system and your C drive, your OS drive, and forget whatever's left on the disk, because once you've shrunk it, there will be unallocated space, and you don't worry about that as far as that step. That's a whole other thing about that. But you would just shrink that down. So I could run that a couple times and get that down to, say, like probably about 100 gigs, maybe 120 gigs. And then that would be the smallest my image could be. Then I put my, take that drive out, install the SSD drive in. Then when I boot using the tool disk, I then, with only the drive that has my image on, which is this one, with only that drive in, you could then apply the image to the brand new blank SSD. It doesn't even have to have anything on it. Windows knows what to do. You might have to run that tool for booting. I was just showing an app that I've only been using for about a day, because I found some of the things it can do are pretty handy. And again, this one's just called MinTool Partition Wizard. It's the free edition. You don't really need anything more than that for home use, but you do need to be careful in here. If you did something like, for example, here, and mark it as active, this thing right here, set active, which seems like it makes sense, don't do that. Windows 10 does not like that. The only thing that can be active is your system. That's it. If you're running Windows 10, it messes up the boot. Your computer doesn't know which disk to boot from, or which partition to boot from. Anyhow, that went a little bit longer than I kind of intended, but hopefully we covered some stuff. Hopefully, and some part of that will be helpful to you guys, whether you're bringing an image back because something happened in Windows and you're just putting your image back on the same disk, or whether you just bought a brand new disk and you want to put Windows on it, or if you've got a dead disk, you know, it's just slow, it's old, and hang on, let me fix this here. So you got still not enough light. So you got an old dead hard drive. You took an image off it, and you want to move it to a new disk. That's all possible. And again, you should, if you have a DVD drive, make your repair tooled CD. I find it, for whatever reason, seems to be a little easier than my my install media, the thing that you can install Windows 10 with. Doesn't ask for serial numbers or anything if you've imaged your functioning drive. You don't even have to do that. It just comes right back the way you left it, which is actually really darn handy. Anyhow, before I stray off topic, again, thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, put them down below. I might looking into some parts of this more in detail if anybody really wants it. And yeah, so again, thanks for watching. If you like this kind of stuff, remember to subscribe, and you never know what kind of crazy video I'm going to come up with. You know, sometimes it's projects, sometimes it's stuff like this. And for those of you that wanted to see Coco, stay tuned, because I'll probably append a little bit of her at the end of this. Anyhow, thanks for watching. Bye.
Hey, Doobie, what you doing? What you doing, Doobie? What you doing? What you doing? Hey, get over. What you doing, Stoops? Get down there. What says Doobie? What's Doobie doing? Hi. Hi. Who's the kissing? You're a good girl. You give him kisses. Yeah? Oh, who's a good puppy? Who's a good puppy? Who's a good puppy?